Let's take a look at the fantasy playoffs. It's All-Star break, but you can do a little bit of forward planning. Michael Bolton, he's got the notebook out.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and I swear, babe, that's never happened to me before. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free and we are available on all platforms. Yeah. Why don't you be a double banger? Hit the thumbs up, ring the notification bell, subscribe. There are going to be shows over the All-Star break. I am recording this show actually right now before the games on Thursday. It's airing after those games, but we're going to have some shows. I still don't know exactly what they're going to be, but we'll plan some stuff out, and there's going to be things there a bit more forward-facing, some waiver wire stuff, injury updates, all that sort of stuff across the next couple of days. Just the content will slow down slightly, but I don't want to stop the momentum. I want to keep things rolling, and you can help that by double banging, and, we all love to do that. So what are we looking at? We're looking at the fantasy playoffs. Now, I believe at times there is too much of a focus on the fantasy playoffs in drafts. The only thing I majorly focus on is when teams have those stinking 2-game weeks for my first couple of picks. That's not a great way to approach things. 3 games and 4 games don't really worry me that much. The way the NBA has scheduled things in recent years as well has meant that there is little variation week to week. It's not like we're situations where a team's playing 12 games over 3 weeks and one's playing 7, which that did used to happen. There used to be periods, say 5-6 years ago, you get like 12 to 8 and 12 to 7. Now it's like 12, 11, 10 usually. That's the only difference you get. Which 1 game a week does make somewhat of a difference, but it's not as stark as it used to be. So that big boost you could get from being a big fantasy playoff legend is not quite there as much. Be really cautious about trying to overplan for the fantasy playoffs. You can say, I'm going to accumulate all these guys, and then when you get to the playoffs, that guy is injured, out of the rotation, not performing, and doesn't do anything for you. Fantasy basketball can change quite a bit, especially when we head to March in February, when things do get a bit wacky with rotations and injuries and coaches trying new things and experiment. There's a whole bunch of stuff that changes, so don't go too over the top with it. That's my number one piece of advice. Pay attention to it, but what is more important, I think, usually, you can make trades if your trade deadline is still available, which some leagues it is, some leagues it isn't, to try and get other guys in, to try and eliminate some of the downfalls of the fantasy playoffs. But most of it is just about intentional streaming, maximizing games played for the week, looking at your matchup and understanding, again, in a category league, you only have to win 5-4. So leaning into strengths, leaning into punts, leaning into what you need to do to beat your opponent for that week. That's what it's about. It's not about rest of season. It's about what happens this week. How do I get 5 categories? Points leagues, it's how do I get more points? How do I get more games in for the week? And how do I do that with my waiver wire ad restrictions that I have? Right? I think all that is relatively straightforward. We're going to do a bunch of different fantasy playoff schedules because I know that you have that. I am going to cover most of them. We're going to do week 19 to 21, which is my recommended playoff schedule, ending on March 24th. We're going to do week 20 to 22, which ends March 31st. It's okay. It's not great. We're going to do the one that ends goes week 21 to week 23. That's the Yahoo default, which ends April 7th. We're going to do the insane playoff schedule, which goes from week 22 to week 24, ending on April 14th, the final day of the season. I'm also going to do default ESPN playoffs, which is a 4-week matchup, which goes from week 21 through to the final day of the season on week 24 with 2-game weeks. So a 4-week playoff matchup. Again, stupid to play into April. You will tell me that it's not, and then we'll get to April, and you'll tell me again that it's not, and then we'll play through April, and you go, yeah, it actually was. It's like, there'll be 1 or 2 sickos go, no, it's actually the real test of skill to see who can go and stream Justin Manea on the right day. Or not. But you'll see that if you do think you're playing in April and you think it's going to be great, it won't be. It'll be bad. Assure you, it's going to be bad. But you can't do anything about it now, can you? You can't change it. Just remember that we will have the recommended dates all through the off-season for next season when that comes out. And this has been honed through many, many years of doing this, and I think it is the correct way or the better way to do it. So, what is my recommended playoff dates and how do they look for fantasy? Well, this is what it is. We have got week 21, or starting week 19, going through to week 21. That ends on March 24th, starts on March the 4th. So basically, the end of week 17, the week 18, then we start in week 19. So 2 matchups away. That is how Locked On Fantasy Basketball Bowl works. Week 19 and week 20 are our 2 playoff weeks, and then week 21 is the final week, the Battle Royale to win all of the prizes. That's how it works. That is the standard date that whenever I talk playoffs, this is what I talk about because I believe you should be playing these dates. Now, if you're in a Roto League, this does not matter. All right, none of this matters. Don't worry about it too much. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. But we're talking head-to-head leagues, categories, or points. So, interestingly, in this period, week 19 through to week 21, every single game day is a quality game day. That is amazing. We don't ever have that. I don't think I've ever seen a period where every single day is a streamable day for 3 weeks. You've got 8 game days. There are some 9 game days. But the NBA has done the perfect schedule for this 3-week period. This is how it goes. 6, 9, 8, 7, 8, 7, 9. 6, 7, 9, 6, 6, 9, 7, 8, 5, 8, 7, 8, 8, 6. It is perfection. This is how the schedule should run. If they're going to persist with the nonsense of 82 games, this is how it all should run. That is a remarkably great schedule for content, for watching, for fantasy. But that means with that sort of schedule where you can stream literally every single day, you've got to be really cautious about utilizing your ads correctly, looking for back-to-backs, looking for how do I get 3 games in 4 nights? How do I maximize? And we'll do those shows, of course, when we get to that part of the year. I'm not going to do that right now saying, well, at this point, this is the guy you want to target to max it. We'll do that as we get closer to it. And you can start to do your own research on this stuff as well. I've got links to the schedule analyzer and Basketball Monster on the YouTube show as well, and you can find that pretty easily. But it is the perfect time to play. Now, the downside of it is we've got some extremes in terms of games. In week 1 of these playoffs, the Brooklyn Nets play 5 games. So don't get excited about Ben Simmons. He won't play all 5 of them. Cam Johnson probably won't play all 5. We've already seen the Nets take a cautious approach with resting players earlier in the season and got fined. Watch for Dorian Finney-Smith. I think Cam Thomas probably plays them all, but you don't know. There might be one of those weird Bridges 10-minute games. That's possible too. So just be aware of that 5-game week in week 1. And this is where the 2-game week problems come in that I've talked about all season. And that is the thing that I've been really cautious about in drafts. In week 2 of this matchup, the Lakers and the Wolves played 2 games. In week 3, finals week, the Hornets and the Mavericks played 2 games. And this is why I've said, hey, I'd be really cautious. If all things are equal, don't look at Luka. Look at Shea. Don't take Luka top 2 or top 3. Take Shea, take Halliburton, take Embiid, which obviously hasn't worked because he's hurt. Take Jokic in there. Take Giannis in a points league. Don't take LaMelo Ball at 7 or 8 or 9. Be really cautious about those sort of players. Be careful of Anthony Davis. He's been great. But 2 games. Be careful of Anthony Edwards. He has 2 games in the playoffs. Be really cautious with it. And if your team is loaded up, you've got Miles Bridges, you've got Brandon Miller, you've got LaMelo Ball, you've picked up Trey Mann. That's great. They're all providing value. That is bad. Because you're not going to drop those guys when you get to the playoffs, but you are going to be at such a game's disadvantage that it's going to be an issue. You should start to diversify those 2-game players out. Lakers, Wolves, it's probably more important for Dallas with like your Gafford and Lively and PJ Washingtons at the moment. Deeper leagues, Josh Green. But the Hornets with Bridges and Miller and Richards and bloody Trey Mann and those sort of guys. Obviously, like you wouldn't want to have Kyrie and Luka on the same team. You don't want to have LeBron and AD on the same team. You don't want to have Edwards and Towns or Gobert on the same team. You've got to start to split that up a little bit. That's how we sit with that at the moment. And I've gone on way too long talking about just the beginning of this, but I just wanted to set a few little ground rules because we've got a lot to cover here in this show, and we'll get to the rest of that in a sec. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. eBay Motors is partnering up with me all season long to give you some of the best fantasy picks each week all season long. Whether it is you're prepping for that daily draft or scouring the waiver wire, we can find the players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So, again, this is more of an evergreen show talking about fantasy playoffs, but if you're watching it when I'm releasing it, well, we've got to really look at Trey Mann, the aforementioned Trey Mann, who's got that 2-game playoff week, but the value of him at the moment is great. He's still available in a lot of waiver wires, and I just think you want to add him. Now, if you can add him and flip him for someone who's equivalent of value, who has a better playoff schedule, yeah, you go ahead and do that, but his value is great at the moment. I don't know how long or if LaMelo Ball is going to return, so Mann has got a pretty strong role there for the Hornets. So that might be one of those moves that can give you that boost, put you into a good playoff spot, and then flipping that player for someone else might be getting you to that fantasy championship, because getting the players that are the perfect fit is what eBay Motors knows all about, and that's the same with your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure that your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever it is your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber and not cash. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to US customers, eligible items only, and exclusions apply. I know that part there is an ad, but that guaranteed fit part of it, even though it's a tagline, it's important. Like having the players that fit what your team needs, having the players that fit in terms of schedule to maximize games played is how you have success in the fantasy playoffs. That's as simple as that. That is how you have success. So let's take a look at, again, my recommended schedule week 19 through to 21. There's only one team that plays 12 games, and that is the Portland Trailblazers. They go 4-4-4. So the Scoot Henderson value is there. I don't know that we're going to have DeAndre Ayton, Jeremy Grant, and Anthony Simons playing. I don't think you'll have Brogdon playing the whole way, but I do think you'll have at least the majority of those games covered by those players. That's why I like to end week 21, because week 22 is when the shutdowns usually start. So Portland's got that great value, but you've got to be keeping an eye on Scoot, obviously. But you look to, do they giving minutes to Dwop Reith? Is Ayton actually out and Reith starting? Is Jabari Walker starting? Have they gone crazy and Delano Banton is starting? That is possible as well. Having a look at who's there, the Blazers sit atop as the only team with a Moses Malone 4-4-4 schedule. There are a bunch of teams that play 11 games. And it's really interesting that we talked about the Brooklyn Nets having that 5-game week. They don't have the best schedule. They've got 5 games in week 1 of the playoffs, and if you have a bye there, that's great. And I'll talk about byes in a second. But the Nets go 5-3-3, so they have 5 games in week 1, and then it's 2 subpar weeks of 3-3. So there are 10 teams that play 11 games during this time frame. People froth over byes. I don't like to set up a lot of my leagues with byes in general. I don't really see the point of it. People think it's like this key to winning. Like, if you get a bye, it means you're going to win. It's worth remembering that teams in the NFL, they get the bye because they qualified at the top of their standings, helps their players rest and refresh. Having a bye in fantasy basketball does not let your players rest and refresh. They don't get over their nagging injuries because they're still playing in real life. So a bye might be good for you. It might be bad because your players might go out there and drop huge performances. They might run at 70% shooting in the bye week when you know regression is going to hit, and then it hits when you've got to play them. Or they get hurt. The converse is you might have someone that's injured who gets better, but there's no inherent advantage to it. The only inherent advantage to having a bye in fantasy basketball is... Well, actually, let's say this too. The inherent advantage is it gives you a week with 4 waiver moves that you can take flyers on guys, and it doesn't matter. Try and pre-plan for the week. You've just got free hits at stuff. That's really the number one advantage to having a bye in fantasies. You've just got a week to sort of play around on the waiver wire and add guys in and see where it goes. And it doesn't matter how that impacts your team for that week, and you can pre-plan for the week ahead. But it doesn't give you this advantage of resting the guys, everyone's healthy, and you're going through. The other advantage is, of course, you only have to win 2 weeks of matchups instead of 3 in a row. But if your team's good enough, you're going to win anyway. And yes, you might say, well, I get the bye and that makes me win. Well, the reason that you've got the bye is because your team was already good. So did you win because you got the bye, or did you get the bye because you were going to win? And it's more the latter. So again, getting that week off doesn't do the things that I think that we think it might. Boston, 3-4-4. Chicago, 4-4-3. Cleveland, 4-3-4. Detroit, 3-4-4. Clippers, 4-4-3. Heat, 4-3-4. Sixers 4-3-4, Kings 4-3-4, Wizards 4-4-3. Now, in this time frame, again, these are all quality games, every single one. So you can stream every day. There's no disadvantage or advantage to any of these. It's more about how do you look at it. But again, you could look at it. The Cavs, if you think you're going to have a bye and not use those teams, and those teams who have the 4 games in week 1, well, that's not as useful. But the teams like a Pistons who have 3, or Boston who has 3 in week 1 of this 3-week period, well, they actually can then go 4-4 for the 2 weeks that you play. So again, slight different nuances as to how you approach, how you value those guys. If we're looking at the next bunch of guys, there are 15 teams that play 10 games. Now, remember, Portland plays 12. 15 teams play 10. Again, every one of these games is a streamable day. Atlanta, Denver, Warriors, Rockets, Pacers, Grizzlies, Bucks all play 10 games. 4-3-3 for Atlanta, 3-4-3 Denver, 3-3-4 Golden State, 4-3-3 Houston. You know what? If you're watching this on video, you can see those numbers. If you're listening on audio, me reading out those numbers, I don't think really helps you because you're not going to be going, oh, okay, cool. So I'm not going to actually read out those games played because I think it's pretty pointless because, again, if you are on audio, you want to go and see the visual representation so you can plan it out. And if you're on video, you can already see it. So we just talk about the teams that have it. Atlanta, Denver, Warriors, Rockets, Pacers, Grizzlies, Bucks, Wolves, Pelicans, Thunder, Magic, Suns, Spurs, Raptors, Jazz. All got 10 games. You'll notice that the Timberwolves, who have a 2-game week, are in here. So they have 4-2-4. That's a noteworthy schedule. So it looks great, but if you're in a situation where you are going to get that first round bye, they've got a terrible 2-4 schedule. That's really bad. But if you're in a 4-2-4 setting and you've got to play that first week, well, there's actually value in having Ant Edwards and Towns and Gobert for the 4 games in week 1. So their schedule's a little bit different. Remembering, once again, that all of these days are streamable. And then we've got 4 teams who only play 9 games. This is the largest spread of games played through any playoff date. Most plays 12, fewest plays 9. So you've got the Hornets who go 3-4-2, 2 games in championship week. Dallas, who goes 3-4-2, 2 games in championship week. The Lakers, who go 4-2-3, so like the Wolves, they have 2 games in the middle. And then the Knicks just go 3-3-3, so they're just below average in every week. These other ones, Charlotte, Dallas, the Lakers, they all have 4-game weeks sprinkled in, but they've got the dreaded 2-game week in there, which is something I do like to avoid. I'm not avoiding Knicks players because they go 3-3-3. I think that's fine. We can adjust to that pretty easily. But that's how that all looks for the schedule. That is the weeks 19 to 21, which is my recommended schedule or playoff schedule. So what if we go to the next one? Weeks 20 to week 22. It ends on the 31st of March. We know that week 1 and week 2 of this setup has all quality games, streaming every day. But finals week is bad. It is very bad from a streaming perspective. And that is important to note because in finals week, we only have 3 streamable days. We go 11, 4, 12, 2, 12, 3, 10. So Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday is streaming days. So what happens in finals week is very different. The Lakers and the Wolves have 2 games in week 1. The Hornets and the Mavericks have 2 games in week 2. And the quality game variance is huge here. It goes between 10 and 6. That is a big, big difference. Whereas in my recommended one, it's got nothing to do with why I recommended it, but in my recommended schedule, we're sitting in that spot where you head in there and every team has the same quality games. Everything is as equally streamable as possible. Here, the Celtics have 10 quality games out of their 11 games. The Pelicans, all 10 of their games are on the low volume days. Whereas you head to the Hornets and 6 of their 10, including them having a 2-game week, 6 of their 10 are on high volume days. The same with the Nets, the same with the Rockets, the same with the Knicks, the same with the Lakers, the same with the Wolves. 6 quality games only. It's a gigantic difference. It's such a big difference compared to the Bucks. We'll talk about this in a second. The Bucks play 9 games only, but all 9 of those games are on low volume days. Versus the Hornets, who play 10 games, but a 2-game week, plus only 6 qualities. So is it better to have Leaky Beasley, or is it better to have Grant Williams? You might use Grant 6 times, and there's a 2-game week, and you might use Leaky 9, or Bobby Portis 9. Big, big difference. Huge difference. Important difference. Important difference. No one plays 12 games during this time frame. Boston, Chicago, Cleveland plays 11, along with Denver, Detroit, Warriors, Clippers, Sixers, Blazers, Kings, Spurs, Jazz, and Wizards. There's 13 teams that play 11 games, so no one goes 4-4-4 during this time frame. No one goes 4-4-4. But remember, in finals week, the last week of this combination is where you have the real quality game crunch. So paying attention to when you're streaming in guys, and if you're looking, well, this team's got 11 games, that's fantastic, and the Celtics is pretty good. Even though they've only got 3 games in final week, they play all of those. No, they don't. They play 2 of those on the quality game days. And other teams don't hit that mark at all. So be really cautious about which team, when you're looking at it, not all 11 game schedules are created equal. If we go to 10 games, there are 12 teams that play 10 games. Atlanta, Brooklyn, Charlotte, Dallas, Houston, the Pacers, the Heat, the Pelicans, the Knicks, the Thunder, the Suns, and the Raptors. And you'll notice that both the Hornets and the Mavericks are in there with 10 games, second most amount of games, even though they've got a 2-game week in there. So again, you go, there's the 2 games in the middle. They've got surrounded by 4s and 4s. But then the Hornets play only 6 quality games out of their 10. That's not super strong, is it? And if we want to dig further into it, if we look at that finals week, there are so many teams like the Hornets that play 0 quality games. 0. The Nets play 0. The Bulls play 0. The Cavs play 0. Nuggets 0. Rockets 0. Clippers 0. Knicks 0. Spurs, Jazz, Wizards, Pacers, Pistons, Wolves, Suns, Blazers, Raptors. 0 quality games in finals week. Meaning when you're looking at those guys and say, well, they've got a great schedule, let's stream them in, and they just sit on your bench the entire week of finals week. Not how you would want to play that. And then the worst schedule are the 9-game teams. There are 5 of them, and the Lakers and the Wolves with their 2-game week in week 1 is there. Now, if you are in a situation, again, where you're going to get a bye, that 2-game week is not as important, so they don't look as bad. The Lakers go 2-3-4, the Wolves go 2-4-3, and everyone else is a 3-3-3 there. And like I talk about, the Bucks have 3-3-3. You go, okay, that's really bad, worst team there, 3-3-3. But all of those games for Milwaukee are quality games. Every one of them. They're the only team that does it out of these 3-game teams. They're the only team that actually maxes, or them and the Pelicans are the only 2 teams that play every one of their games on a low volume day. Meaning when you get to finals week, their value is bumped up more than other teams. I do really recommend you go and dig into an actual schedule grid and plan it out. So I'm throwing you a bunch of numbers, but I'm more giving you an idea on planting that idea consistently in your head. When games are played is important. Not every 10-game playoff schedule, 11-game schedule is created equal. Today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That is right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Okay, so that's the first bunch of playoff settings done. Let's go to the next group, and we're talking when we go week 21 through to week 23. This is Yahoo Default. Yahoo Default. It ends on the 7th of April. Week 1, every game is a quality game. Week 2, there's only 3 of those days, like the finals of the last one, that are quality games. And then when you get to the finals week, week 3, 5 of the 7 days are quality games. So in that finals week, it goes 6, 9, 9, 5, really strong start to the week. Then 12 games Friday, 4 games Saturday, 13 games Sunday. It stinks. The NBA has absolutely backloaded this schedule so that the final 2 weeks of the season have so many games in them. And I don't really know why they do that. And I think that's going to exacerbate the sitting and resting and back-to-backs because the load is gigantic. So playoff teams are going to want to sit players down. Tanking teams are not going to want to risk this stuff. The only teams that are going to be pushing are the teams that are looking for seeding or play-in stuff. And it's going to lead to some problems. I think it's a ridiculous idea. I don't know why they pumped it so high in there. Charlotte and Dallas have the 2 games in week 1. And then there's no other anomalies for the rest of the season now. No 5 gamers or no 2 gamers. The quality game is a big variance. It goes from 9 to 4 for teams. That is a huge difference. Over 3 weeks, 5 quality game differences is massive, and it is important for you to know that. There are 4 teams that play 12 games over this period. They all go 4-4-4. Cleveland, the Warriors, the Sixers, and the Kings all have the 12-game schedule. But as per usual, the differences between those is important to note. And we would love for there to be differences, but there's not. So weirdly enough, all of those 4 teams play 7 quality games out of their 12. Now, obviously, in week 1, all 4 of those count. So if over their 8 remaining games, over the final 2 weeks, there's 3 quality games. That's pretty bad, yeah? You get all 4 games in week 1, and then they have 3 streaming valuable days over 2 weeks, despite playing 8 games. It's not very good. So don't get completely fooled. Don't get completely, well, they're a 4-4-4. It's the best playoff schedule. I love my 4-4-4 team. I'm going to get the Kings guys in. When your fringe Kings, your Barnes, Herder, maybe Monk, maybe Murray, you might use them 3 times, depending on your roster. You might use them 3 times in the final 2 weeks of the playoffs out of their 8 games. It's dreadful. It's really bad. Let's look at the 11-game teams because there are 16 of these. There's a lot, man. Atlanta, Brooklyn, Boston, Detroit, Houston, Indiana, Clippers, Lakers, Heat, Wolves, Pelicans, Knicks, Thunder, Blazers, Jazz, and Wizards. You'll know that none of the 2-game teams are listed here, which are the Hornets and the Mavs, 2 games in week 1. So again, we are talking about most teams, majority of teams playing 11 games during this time frame, but there are going to be stark differences. The Atlanta Hawks, for example, have 9 quality games. They have 9 quality games, and they play 3 games in week 1. So they're all quality games. So 6 of their next 8 are quality games. So you compare the Hawks with 6 quality games out of their 8 across those final 2 weeks versus the Kings or the Warriors or the Cavs who have 3. Or the Sixers, the other one. 3 versus 6. So my Bogdan Bogdanovic is probably double the value of a Keegan Murray. Now, I don't know what the Hawks are going to do. Maybe it's Kobe Buffkin that's in there. But the value is so much different. The Celtics have 8. The Pelicans have 9 out of their 11 as quality games here. 9 of the 11 of quality games. And what you want to look at there, so like the Hawks are the better one because they only have 3 games in week 1, so they're able to really stack up the qualities across the final 2. But the Pelicans with those 9 are interesting as well. So they have 5 quality games over the final 2 weeks. Not quite as good as the Hawks 6, but still pretty solid. Still pretty solid. And the Celtics have got the 8, like I said. Like I said there. But not all 11s are the same. Not all 12s are the same. Some 11s are better than 12s. It really does depend. And the lowest amount of games this week is 10. And 10 teams have it. Charlotte, Chicago, Dallas, Denver, Memphis, Milwaukee, Orlando, Phoenix, the Spurs, and the Raptors. You'll notice the Hornets and the Mavericks with a 2-game week in week 1. If you've got the bye, then it's totally good because they play 4-4. They're pretty good after that. It's all good to go. But again, where do the quality games sit? Well, the Bucks are looking pretty good. They have 3 games in week 1. That is 3 quality games, obviously. And then over the final 2 weeks, 5 quality games. That's the same as what the Pelicans is. It's 1 less than the Hawks. It's 2 more than those 12-game teams. So while the Bucks have got 10 games versus the Cavs having 12, a fringe Bucks player is better than a fringe Cavs player, most likely. These are important things. Very important things when you're structuring it out. It is not about the bulk of the games. And then on the flip side, like the Hornets or the Bulls, they've only got 4 quality games in total. Now, the Hornets are a little bit different because they've got 4 quality game totals. They've got 2 games in the week 1, so they've got 2 quality games across the final 2 weeks. The Bulls have only got 4 quality games. So that means they go 3 of those in week 1, and they play 1 streamable day across the final 2 weeks of this playoff schedule. 1. That's terrible. There are teams here. I'm just going to have a look who it is. Is it the Spurs? No, it's not actually. I thought there was a team that might have had like one where they had no quality games over the final 2 weeks, but no, there's not. So yeah, it's just the Spurs only have 4 qualities in total, and they're like the Bulls. They have 1. They have 1 across the final 2 games of the week. Across the final 2 weeks of the matchup, which again is just, it's really quite bad. It's just not giving you that value at all that you think you might be getting. So if you want to be crazy and finish on the end of the regular season, good luck to you. It's going to be bad, I promise you. It's very hard for me to tell you add these players because it's going to be wild stuff everywhere. Outside of about 6 teams, everything's going to be crazy. Week 22 to 24, it ends on the 14th of April. In week 1, there are 3 quality games streaming days. In week 2, there are 5. And in week 3, the final week of the season, absolute disaster. The most jam-packed schedule you would find. 2 quality games in week 3. The final week, 2. Quality game totals varies, which unbelievably, from 2 to 7. So over a 3-week period, there are teams that play 2 low-volume days. One of those is the Chicago Bulls, the Spurs, the Jazz, the Wizards, and the Pacers. 2 quality games across the entirety of those 3 weeks. Absolutely horrendous. So when you're looking at Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Smith, Benedict Mathurin, Aaron Nesmith, Danny Avdia maybe, Marvin Bagley perhaps, you might not use them at all. Who else have I got? The Jazz. Maybe it is Keontae George. There are going to be weeks where you just don't use these players. Amazing. Like, you just won't use them. They'll sit on your bench the entire time, wasting time when you could be getting someone in that final week. Even though there's only 2 quality games on in that final week, you could be able to find somebody who gives you more than 0. So if we look at championship week, final week of the season, there are the Pacers, Lakers, Sixers, and Wizards who play 0 quality games. Everyone else only plays 1. So nobody even gets to double up on both of those days. Just a dreadful week. If I have a look at how it actually schedules out, it's 0 games on Monday. That is NCAA Final Four Championship. There's 14 games on Tuesday. Disgusting. There's 8 on Wednesday, 5 on Thursday. So there's your stream days. And then it's 15 Friday, 0 Saturday, 15 Sunday. So you cannot stream the final 3 days of the week. Really, that's not true because, again, there's going to be wild situations where you can drop players and add guys in. But as a general rule, you are going to have a completely full roster on Friday and Sunday to end that week. Not only is it terrible in terms of everyone who's going to be sitting and random players popping up, but the last 3 days are going to be a complete cluster with 15 games on 2 of the 3 days and then a day off in the middle with nothing happening, where you're going to be having to have a look of, like, how do I get guys in? It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be ridiculous. It is a bad, bad week. So who plays 9 games? I don't write out what the schedule is for all these teams because all of them just go 4-4-4. They're all 12-game teams. Atlanta, Charlotte, Dallas, Warriors, Rockets, Clippers, Knicks, Thunder, and Kings go 4-4-4 to finish. Remembering, again, that having the wherewithal to know how the schedule plays out is important. Like the Hornets, for example, play 12 games. So we've talked about how bad their schedule is with a 2-game week. Well, in this period, they have 12. That's great. That's the most. Unfortunately, they play 3 quality games. 3. That's shocking. It's bad. The Rockets, the Clippers, the Knicks play 3 quality games. Whereas the Celtics, who play 11 games total, they have 5 quality games. It's the Hawks that lead the way with 7. So they have, if you finish anywhere in April, 7th of April or 14th of April, the Hawks have probably the best schedule of any team. They've probably got the best schedule, and you probably don't really hear that, but they have got the best schedule of any team. There are 20 teams that play 11 games. Again, I'm not going to read out all of the names or all of their individual schedules, but Brooklyn, Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, Denver, Detroit, Lakers, Grizzlies, Heat, Bucks, Wolves, Pelicans, Magic, Sixers, Suns, Blazers, Spurs, Raptors, Jazz, and Wizards. You can see all the numbers there. You can go check a schedule grid to see all those numbers. But again, it is important to note who has the bad ones. It's the Bulls have got 2 quality games. The Bucks have got 6. The Pelicans have got 6. Pretty good. The Grizzlies have got 5, and the Celtics have got 5. You're not going to get much better than that. Well, you're not going to get better than that at all. So, yeah, the Wizards, the Jazz, and the Spurs also have only 2, the same as the Bulls. So just some horrific streaming schedules. So it's always important, how can I use these guys? Are 11 games important? For the top end guys, it is important. For your back end guys, it's not important. It's about when you can use them. And there's only one team that plays 10 games over that period. It's the Pacers. And unfortunately for the Pacers, they also have that week in the final week where they don't play a single quality game. So they only have 10 games in total. They only play 2 quality games, and they occur in week 1 and week 2 of the playoffs. So be really cautious about your Nembhards, Nesmiths, McConnells, Smiths, Toppins, whoever. It's just unusable for a lot of those guys. And it's obviously worse for Halliburton and Siakam as well. So if you decided that you wanted to move off those guys for someone equivalent to bump you up to a Hawks player, a Trae Young for Tyrese Halliburton, might be a big W for you. Although, who knows, someone might get hurt at any point. But that might be a huge W. Getting from 2 quality games to 7, from 10 overall games to 12. It's a big difference. And that's the sort of thing that you might want to take a squiz at, I think. So, that is that. If you're on ESPN Standard, that is the final 4 weeks of the regular season. Week 1 has 7 quality games, all streamable. Then you go week 2 with 3, week 3 with 5, and week 4 with 2. Quality game has pretty big variance. It's between 10 and 5. Charlotte and Dallas have 2 games in week 1 of this ESPN Standard 4-week playoff schedule where each matchup is 2 weeks. There are 2 teams that play 16 games that end the season with a 4-4-4-4. It is the 2 Northern California teams. Don't know why that's the case, but the Golden State Warriors and the Sacramento Kings. In fact, I think the Warriors only have that because of the rescheduled game against the Dallas Mavericks in that time frame. So they've got the 16 games there, and both of them have 8 quality games, so that's on the high end. The low end is 5, the high end is 10. So so it's not bad for them, but no real separation in terms of overall quality game numbers. There are 14 teams that play 15 games across this 3-week period. Atlanta, Boston, Cleveland, Detroit, Houston, the Clippers, Heat, Wolves, Pelicans, Knicks, Thunder, Sixers, Blazers, and Jazz. Now, in those group of teams, the Hawks have, again, the Hawks and the Pelicans are the best. 10 quality games out of 15. The Celtics have 9, and then you've got the worst ones that have 6. No one goes down to 5 out of this 15-game group. It's the Rockets with 6, the Clippers with 6, the Knicks with 6, and the Jazz with 6 over that time period. And then the lower end is 14 teams playing 14 games. So the difference between 15 and 14 is obviously 1 game across 3 weeks. It's not very much, and it's the exact same amount of teams. So you're not at a gigantic disadvantage if your team's got 14 games. Because half the league has got it, basically, and half the league's got 15, and it's 1 game over 3 weeks. It doesn't make that much of a difference. Where you need to look at it is what the difference comes in with quality games. And this is where you have a bunch of teams playing 5, whereas the Bucks play 9. But the Bucks 9, for example, 9 out of their 14 being quality, compares, how good does that compare to the Knicks having 6? So if you are, I'm hoping the Precious Achiuwa pops off, or if I'm going to hold Josh Hart, well, you'll have 6 quality games, whereas Leaky Beasley is going to be way better than that. And that becomes important too. A lot of what we do in the playoffs is adjustments right as it happens. We're maximizing our weeks, and we'll do all those shows there, of course. But now it's about a little bit of future planning. How can you trade up? Can you trade out of situations to get you into a spot where your top end guy, you might have moved off that 2-game week? Or you've moved into a situation where if it is in the finals or it's a second week, that you've moved away from a situation where those back-end players that you might have or mid-range players you might have. So that they then become more valuable or they're less valuable to you because of the quality games. Now, quality games is more important for streaming, but the more guys that you can get that play on quality game days means that on those higher volume days, you actually open up those roster spots. So while I don't really prioritize, hey, my top end guys, they need to be on teams with the really high quality game numbers. If you find someone that's relatively equivalent, let's say the example in this period, like we're talking about the Pelicans having 10 quality games, or Trae Young and the Hawks having 10 of their 15, right? Having as quality games versus, let's say Lauri Markkanen for the Jazz, who's got 6 quality games out of 15. If you made a trade of, let's use Trae Young. I don't know if Trae Young for Lowry you consider fair or not. Some might say that that's way too much in Trae's favor. I think I agree. But I could use Jalen Johnson or DeJounte Murray, and someone say that's way too much in favor of Lauri Markkanen. True, Markkanen probably doesn't play the rest of the season all the way through, to be fair, but for the sake of this argument. Moving off of a Lauri Markkanen or a Walker Kessler or whoever, but even if it's a top-endish sort of guy, they've got the same amount of games. Jalen Johnson for Lauri Markkanen, it's even a step down in value, most likely for you. Having Jalen Johnson play 2/3 of his games on the lower volume days means that roster spot then opens up on the higher volume days, and then your streaming capabilities change. So if you have, if he starts to play on all the low volume days, then your high volume Wednesday or high volume Friday or whatever, maybe you do have the ability to add somebody in. Or maybe you stack some Hawks guys, or you get a Brandon Ingram and you send out someone from the Clippers because they only have 6 quality games. Maybe you look at, I'll send Paul George and get Brandon Ingram. And Brandon Ingram plays 10 quality games, Paul George plays 6. And now you've turned Lauri Markkanen and Paul George into Brandon Ingram and Jalen Johnson. And that has given you a net increase of 8 quality games played, meaning that means there's 8 extra games played on high volume days that have opened up on your roster that then opens up your streaming capabilities on those days as well. That is something that doesn't really get talked about. You can very easily say, well, I'm going to switch a 2-game player into playoffs for a 3-game or a 12-game or a 4-4-4 for a 4-4-3 or whatever and get 1 extra game over the week. That's cool. That's like the Drake meme of like the face, but the other one's the hand pointing like, hey, I've just snagged 5 extra quality games over a playoff period, even though they play the same amount of games, and I'd start them every day anyway, but moving that guy from Wednesday in his games onto Tuesday means that my Wednesday now has an open slot that somebody else can play. Get it? I think it makes sense. I hope it makes sense. Regardless, you can go and play around with all of the schedule tools and see how that plays out, but be very, very cautious about when the games are played. And the hidden value, the hidden feature, the hidden advantage you can get is trading same playoff schedule players for more quality game players during that time frame to open up your streaming capabilities. Now, if you're using my recommended playoff schedule, that doesn't matter at all because every single game is streamable. Does not matter. So we're looking more at volume of games and all that sort of stuff. We can't predict who's going to be in or out. That's really hard to do. But giving yourself a situation where you can get like 1 game, who cares? 1 game over 3 weeks, 1 game over 4 weeks, doesn't matter. Who cares? It means nothing. If you can get 4, 5 extra qualities, it's a massive deal. It is an absolutely massive deal, I think. And you might disagree, and that is cool. And if you do, down in the comments below. So hit subscribe. Come back and watch this video many, many times between now and your playoffs. You can have a look at all the things up on the screen. Go to our schedule analyzer over at Basketball Monster as well to have a look at how the quality games all shake out. And guys, we are done here. Enjoy the All-Star break. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. See ya.